Today is September 27th, it's 4 p.m., and we are holding the Public Works and Finance Committee meeting. And with me today is Ann Zabala and Art Becky, as well as Bill Belnoff, and a variety of different people in the audience. Okay, and we're going to start. First thing is the approval of the September 13th Public Works and Finance Committee minutes.
Look good to me. Yep.
Look good to me too. Okay. Thanks. So the second issue on there is Rolling Hills, 9th edition, development agreement, Todd Dredge.
Oh, I don't know where these are. Oh, must not have made it in there. I apologize.
You know what? I bet you can do it.
Great. As you mentioned, I'm here to present the development agreement for the Rolling Hills 9th edition. Rolling Hills 9th edition is a piece of property just at the eastern extents of 3rd Street, kind of the northeast of all the other Rolling Hills additions. The proposed development is essentially the extension of 3rd Street, approximately 300 feet, to include 10 new lots. Improvements for the subdivision would be essentially that 3rd Street section, the frontage improvements, curb, gutter, sidewalk, and then utilities required to service the 10 lots. In the development agreement, no phasing has been requested, and parkland was already satisfied in the previous development, so no parkland is specified. The development agreement is essentially the city's standard language that's in there included right now. With that, we recommend approval of the development agreement. I'll stand for any questions you have.
Any questions? Not for me. Not for me.
Well, we saw this one some time back, and
June 21st.
and
was-
3rd Street just stubs off, right?
Does, yep,
Okay.
correct.
Looks good
Consent
to me.
agenda?
Yes. Okay.
Here goes on again. Here we go, Todd.
Yep, follow-up, can't have one without the other. This is the monumentation agreement for the Rolling Hills 9th. As you know, this is basically, you can't set the interior pins when you're building a division. So it allows the city to accept a security to hold in case they have to go set the pins if the developer's not able to. Security for this is roughly $3,400. And monumentation agreement is the city's standard language. Nothing's really been modified except for the parties involved. So with that, recommend approval of the monumentation agreement. And I'll stand for any questions you have.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions on that. Pretty much standard.
Standard. Consent agenda.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Jen Pfeiffer. Personnel policy updates.
Good afternoon. So the policy that we have for consideration this afternoon is our on-call policy, portion of our personnel policy book. This update has, though it had a lot of discussion that went on the past 6 weeks, has not changed significantly from the current policy. We had done a pilot program of an on-alert status for primarily our public works and services, the idea being that not all people need to be called out at the same time. The on-alert provided a bit of a triage approach. We've taken what worked well from that pilot and then have adjusted it to a strictly on-call status, because in those positions, whether everyone's called out all the time or not, they're still being restricted, their movements are restricted, they need to stay close to town, need to be ready to respond, those types of things. So we had a lot of discussion on that, which was great. The Employee Advisory Committee was really helpful in talking through that and providing perspectives, and I really appreciated that. So we have a basic on-call status with on-call compensation, callback status with the callback compensation outlined. We did do some work on making sure that when we're all talking about shifts, we're talking about the same shifts for the same on-call status and so on and so forth. So some consistency was reviewed and made sure we were up to speed on that. Other than that, no major additional changes, no major additions, period. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Could you highlight a little bit the difference between on-call and callback?
Yeah, so on-call is simply being ready to respond. Callback is when you get the call in. It almost could be an on-call call-in, would be maybe a more clear way to describe it. But that would be when you are called back to work when you are on call. And that could be to address a number of issues depending on the department and
So the
whatnot.
one is you're on call, and then you get compensated for that, and if you get called in, you get an additional compensation.
Yes, for just being on on-call status, say there are no callbacks for that shift, you would get 2 hours of pay simply for being on call.
Regardless of
and-
how much time you're on call?
Right. Per shift, so it's 2 hours per shift. And then the callback would be actual paid time on the job with a minimum set therein for having to come in, travel in and whatnot.
So someone could actually be getting compensated both for being on call and for being called in?
Yes, depending on the situation.
So it says that on-call shift hours usually coincide with regular shift hours. So you can be on call while you're still working on your job?
This is to get us through the Friday afternoon to Saturday morning in some instances. So providing an on-call shift, either we don't have somebody on call Friday night. A good example of this would be the Parks Department. This is one area that we're looking at how we might need to use this policy differently in the future. We don't have anyone on call Friday evening. Well, as we have more events happening downtown and tournaments happening on our fields, those types of things, we're keeping a very close eye on the times where people may be called in and looking at, should we have an on-call person for that Friday night? We don't have any situations at this point that led us to think, okay, maybe we need a half shift or a three-quarter shift or whatever that might be. Every other department and division throughout the city, they typically do 24-hour shifts, but they do them in week-long chunks. So there's just that transition period between, we don't need somebody Monday through Friday, but we might want to get somebody on Friday, where that would be the instance where, say, the shift runs from 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. They're technically would be on call while they're at work, but they're really on call from that 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. when they get off of work to 6 a.m. the next morning.
Yeah, I guess I'm just hanging up on the coincide with regular hours. And so the language is tripping me up a little bit.
Yeah,
But
and-
as long as you guys understand
Yeah.
what this means.
It's that one time when you don't have someone on call every day of the year. And that's trying to make that Friday to Saturday transition.
Every day and all night long? Or, I mean, like, if there's nothing going on, then you would have still somebody going on in parks or something like that?
Not necessarily for parks. For instance, having somebody available the middle of the night Wednesday for parks doesn't make much sense, but having someone available for water, sewer,
Yes.
police, absolutely makes sense to have those people on 24/7, basically. So most of our on-call positions are very much 24 hours a day for the week. And then that parks is the one that's the big outlier right there.
Okay, so you're thinking it'd be water, sewer, police?
Oh, gosh, I should have written the list down. Water, sewer, police,
Streets.
streets, yes. And Parks does a little bit different schedule in the winter. They'll actually activate some on-call when we know we have large storm systems coming. And they also do a different rotation in the summer, which is just facilities for the pool. I think those, storm may, we haven't talked
It'd be
about it quite yet,
streets,
but it would be
right.
streets really in that scenario.
Okay.
That was my question. And I was just wondering about exempt employees. I know that they're not a part of this, but I'm wondering, I guess, if that affects different exempt employees differently, like if there are some who end up working those hours. Generally not, right?
I mean, it's so that, we do have a standard piece of language in here. Exempt employees are paid a salary that reflects the full responsibility of the position, including being on call or being called back to work. And because of the exempt status, they are not eligible for callback pay or on-call status pay.
But are they on the rotation to actually take call?
We've discussed that a bit in the information systems department. That it's more of a review to see how many calls are being made, how many times somebody's being called out. If it's excessive and it's an exempt employee, then we'll usually look at, okay, what can we do to make it so it's not excessive on an exempt employee? There's a process improvement or a schedule change or something that we need to look at. So we work with those on a case-by-case basis.
Since we have police officers around the clock, why would you have a police officer on call?
Detectives. It's the detective division, yep.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, do you get some kind of control over that? I mean, like, the answer is, there's some big event, and I maybe know I would have been on call Friday night. Can you just say, can someone else cover for me?
The scheduling happens in advance, so the supervisor would set the schedule. There are, we find typically a lot of the newer employees will take more of the on-call shifts. There's some opportunities to get some comp time if you're called back in, so if you're trying to build vacation or some of those types of things. And it's also a really great learning experience. If you're called back in, if there's something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, which is typically what a callback event would be, you're there with other experienced personnel as well, but you're getting a different experience set in that instance.
Yeah, I just have a question on that, because the section there on-call compensation specifically says compensation may not be taken as compensatory pay.
For on-call status, for just the 2 hours for being on call, you don't get called back in, you may not use that for compensatory time.
Okay,
If you're called back in, then you may use that and claim that as comp time.
This is a complicated pay sheet.
This was the most intense personnel policy we've reviewed for one page of policy. So I think we've got it simplified and ironed out to the point where it works for everyone. But yeah, and make sure payroll knows that it works for them too. So it does very much mirror the way we've been doing things. It just simplifies the language and ensures that consistency is there.
again, I just have to say thank you for this, because it's always so much work, the tediousness. I mean, it's necessary, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like making sure it's all consistent and applied, equally for everyone.
Right, well, and the list of to-dos is much shorter than the list of dones now.
Yeah, that was
So
really
we'll
fun.
have an entire personnel policy book to finalize here in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Any questions,
Thank
any
you.
other questions?
Thank you, Jen.
Consent agreement? Sure. Great. Okay. Okay, so we now have the police department, and we have Elisa Anderson and Eric Warner.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So Eric and I are here today to present to you a grant award that was recently received. This is a grant that we applied for back in February, and it was one that Eric had actually heard about in a training session. And originally we referred to it as the STEP grant, the Select Traffic Enforcement Program grant, but when we got our award paperwork, they didn't use that type of a name. That was really the federal name for it. So now we're looking at the OHS Highway Safety Grant for federal fiscal year 2022. But really what this grant does is allows the traffic officer or officers to be, for the city to be reimbursed for their time providing traffic safety. And that really, it kind of boils down to combating things that cause crashes or serious, crashes that actually cause death or major injuries, excuse me. So I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit about the mechanics of it, and then Eric can kind of talk to you about how he sees rolling out this program. So we've received an award for $100,000, and that is basically 2,080 hours of officer time with fringe benefits included. And then there is some overtime included within that. So the budget's a little bit flexible. We also have a $25,000 either cash or in-kind match. And that can be mileage or any expenses that we may have for maybe educational items that aren't provided by OHS, those types of things. But the majority of it will be covered by mileage and administrative and just Eric in general. So we spoke with the program officer last week, and there are some options throughout the year to possibly amend the budget so that we could buy radar equipment or those types of things that would help them implement the program. So we'll be meeting with OHS on October 5th, and we'll be talking about the program and how all that will work, but we're here today basically to request that you allow us to accept the award. So I'll let you, Eric, kind of talk about the rollout of the program.
Much like we explained back in February, this grant money will allow us to dedicate officers on regular patrol, dedicate them to running traffic only. So they would essentially be a traffic officer for as long as time permitted. If things got super busy, they would have to come off of that and engage in patrol duties. But primarily it would be used during shifts where there's a surplus of officers, usually 4 or 5 officers at any given time. is the maximum number we have on the street. And so we'd be able to have 4 officers on a slow night to do just regular patrol duties, to take calls, and then that 5th officer would be able to be engaged in traffic duties.
So I forget what, I think we talked about it before, but are we hiring new officers in order to fulfill this?
It's to reimburse officer time, and to dedicate towards traffic enforcement, because our officers already do traffic when they're not taking calls for service, but they're not dedicated to that. We would dedicate an officer, so if calls come in, this one officer would still be dedicated to running traffic calls, that sort of thing.
So if we don't have any new police officers, does that extra $100,000 basically go back to the police department, and the police department can use the money that we've allocated to pay for those officers who would normally be on, but now we're dedicating them to,
It's basically reimburses the city for services that we would be providing otherwise. They may add an officer to a shift if they have staffing available, but we aren't hiring anyone new.
okay, thank you.
As a
So-
follow-up to that, though, are there going to be salary savings? I can't remember if this was estimated in the budget. I think it was, because it was back in February, right?
I think, and I'm not positive, that would be more of possibly a Sarah and Bill question, but we didn't know at the time when the budget was prepared if we would get this award, so I think that the salaries for the department were fully budgeted, and we haven't had any time to have any discussion about how that money could elsewhere be used. That's kind of more of a management question.
So typically, we would, I mean, in theory, we would expend the same salary, we would just be reimbursed, so we'd have another revenue stream coming into the general fund. At the end of the year, that's just going to increase unanticipated fund balance for that $100,000 amount. And then the council can decide how to reallocate that in the upcoming FY23 budget.
But would it be dedicated to the police department?
No,
Really? Oh,
no, it would not have to be dedicated. It's just a reimbursement of personnel expenses we're expending, but it's not dedicated to any operation that was really up to the council to decide. It just will end up showing as an additional revenue to the general fund at the end of the year, and that any fund balance will be slightly higher than may otherwise have been, and the council can decide how to allocate that funding in the future.
Eric, thank you for finding that and for following up and putting the grant forward.
So one other comment question, I love getting reimbursement money, clearly. But every grant comes with some stipulations, so is there a certain matrix of criteria for success or impact that we have to report back?
It's essentially duties that I'm already doing, educating the public, handing out educational materials on traffic stop, that sort of thing, enforcing seatbelt.
So this is the kind of thing you just have to keep track of, so at the end, you just, dear federal government, we did all these.
Yeah, we would track the hours separately from the way we were tracking regular hours. It would be itemized differently in our Planet system, and I believe that in the, the payroll system as well.
Yeah, and there are, I was looking for the form, I don't know if I have it handy right here, but there's a list of different categories that the police department, they'll ask them to track. And basically, yes, I mean, there are performance metrics. They haven't given us specific ones, but the funding, I think, overall will show that it supports, we'll see a decrease, you know, in traffic stops and those things in the future. This isn't, this fund itself isn't one that we've seen in the state before. This is a new program that that's not one that we've participated in. And I think it really helps with the burden of how much, you know, law enforcement costs. And so it's an after the fact, so we'll send in our reimbursement requests each month after the hours have been worked.
And do you know if it's a potentially recurring grant?
We don't know.
I do, yeah, it
Oh,
would
is
be a
it?
potentially recurring grant.
Great, that
yeah.
makes it
We
easier.
missed the last.
Once you set up the system,
Yeah.
you want to be
Yeah.
able to continue to
We
use
missed the
it.
last deadline for the fiscal 21.
Okay, great.
I had one more question. I'm curious, we 2 weeks ago had the Safe Routes to School coordinator here talking about traffic calming over on D and Mountain View.
Yeah.
Do we think this will give us any extra capacity to address that?
We would be limited to the officers we already have on staff.
Yeah.
And we typically dedicate officers for school zone patrols in the mornings and afternoons where available, especially in the afternoons when we get typically more calls for service. Mornings, each officer picks a school and we go and we make sure that that school zone is safe.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Consent agenda?
Yes,
Thank you
please.
both.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seriously, thank you for coming up with a way to save us money. Okay, Mia. Mia Baptista,
Thank you.
amendment to the code.
Yes, so if you recall, just give a quick, real brief summary. Back in October 7, 2019 is when council passed a resolution addressing the reorganization model that we were then deploying and gave us direction to make the code revisions. We began doing that, if you recall, that was a huge overhaul. There was a lot of different, and I don't have the original ordinance, but it was significant. And so when we did that, then COVID hit, we kind of paused getting that done. So when we came forward back in July of 2021, and you passed ordinance 2021-09, we realized when the city clerk was then was codifying the city code, caught that there was a couple sections that were modified in between, that were amended in between. And so back in 2019, when we began the rewrite, 2 sections that are addressed in here were amended. And so when we then brought forward the reorganization ordinance in July, we had 2 chapters that didn't reflect the current code based on the 2020 amendments. And so that's what this is here to fix. And then the last section that's in there, the Health and Environment Commission, that changed its name back in, I believe, 2008. And we hadn't updated this particular title and chapters. So we wanted to make that change since we were coming forward, cleaning things up. So that's what these are referenced. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you look through it, it seems pretty self-explanatory, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I don't have any good cleanup of code.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, thank you for doing
Okay,
that.
yep.
It must be our day to clean up various codes and sections for us. And there we go with thank you very much, because that is a necessary yet tedious
Right,
job.
yeah.
So thank you, Mia.
You're welcome.
I think this one needs to go on regular.
Yeah.
As an ordinance,
I
we'll
think
put on a
so.
regular agenda. We do have one other item, an appeal to a wireless telecommunications denial by the board on that night, but we can easily accommodate this, given it's a fairly brief item.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, there we go.
Report.
Yeah, we have a report. We have a report here from Megan Cherry.
Does our clicker work from the table now?
I don't know
No.
if it's been fixed yet or not.
Was it? Okay.
I don't know. We try.
We're gonna see. Oh, look at that.
It works.
Okay, good. It's
Got
better
it.
to sit here, I think. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today. I'm here to give you a report on arts events. Typically, I report to admin, and last time I reported to Public Works Finance, so it's nice to follow up with a couple of pieces. Today we're going to talk a little bit about 3 programs: Art Walk, Entertainment in the Park, and Palouse Plein Air. You'll remember that last time I was here, I talked about our setup for Palouse Plein Air, which is our first topic, and there we go. Okay, and also as a disclaimer, this is a report with lots of text on the slide, so apologies for that. This event was a smashing success this year. What's really great about some of the adaptations we've made in the last couple of years is that a lot of what we're doing can be done in a contactless fashion. And I know that just hearing the word event makes people think about safety, and rightly so. Just wanted to mention before I get into numbers that the reception was held at the Moscow Contemporary. Everyone wore masks. They were monitoring crowd sizes, and we had the cutest little individually wrapped snacks that everybody sort of took home with them. So
as we're thinking about events in general, we're being really mindful about safety. So the big news for plein air was that we had a massive increase in artist registrations this year, which feels really great to see artists coming in from multiple states, from around the state of Idaho, and really having a great time painting the Palouse. So the way this event works is the artwork is dropped off on a Thursday. Friday morning, you walk into the gallery, nothing's hung, and by Friday at 5 o'clock, we had 144 artworks on the wall. It was pretty amazing. So one other thing I wanted to mention is that this is one of the times during the year when we typically collect a piece for the portable collection. So the piece on the far right, that's marked City Purchase Award, is one that we collected for this year. It's an artist who is from Sandpoint, but this painting is north of Moscow, and if you could see it a little bit closer, there's the Kibbe Dome off in the distance. So that'll be coming into the portable collection. At this point, the exhibition is up through October 17th, and then we sort of put this one to bed until around April when registration opens again. So I'm sure I'll come back and give more updates on this program before we hit go on it. Okay. Yes, there we go. Okay, probably the biggest news of the day is Art Walk. I'm sure you've all seen the promotions about Art Walk expanding. And wanted to take a minute to talk about the why of it, and then also to give a little bit of background about the revenue side of that. And so Art Walk has been, up until this point, an annual event with a traditional street fair that we all know and love. We are keeping that traditional street fair that is going to be on June 16th. One of the things that we've heard from parts of the community is, well, with that big street fair, maybe we don't focus on the art and the host locations as much. And so this expansion of the season starts to answer that need a bit. The other part of it, and this is probably the biggest reason why the program has expanded to the monthly model, is that it drives the creative economy for it to happen on a monthly basis. I kind of equate this to exercise. If I exercise once in a year, I'm probably not going to get very far. I've tried this, it doesn't work. So in any case, the intent is to drive the health and vitality of the creative economy in Moscow by giving audiences more opportunities to see and experience all of these different forms of art, and also for artists to share their works and for businesses to welcome the creative world into their brick and mortar. And so another thing that I wanted to mention about this program is we're featuring not just the visual arts, but we also have opportunities for businesses to feature performing arts, culinary arts, and literary arts. So really trying to throw the doors open wide and be inclusive here. So just to confirm, October through May is art and host locations only. In June, we will see that familiar street fair. We'll see we'll talk more about how the entertainment district threads into that experience as we get closer to it. So it's exciting times. I do have save the dates that I will hand around to you. I'm sure I've already dropped these in your boxes, but might as well have another one.
I have a question, Megan.
Yeah.
For something like culinary arts, are you envisioning kind of a pop-up restaurant type situation? Did you all talk about that?
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely could be. I think an example, okay, so if I'm a business that is focused on culinary art, if I'm a restaurant, I could say, I've booked this band and I want to highlight a featured wine of the month, and here's an appetizer special that is new, latest, greatest, and we want people to try it out. So that's one model. Another
theme, like every third Thursday there'll be a theme.
Not necessarily. I think it's more organic than that. There's not a set theme for each third Thursday. So businesses can say, all right, we've got
here are the creative offerings that we have for just, this is what we've got on offer, and as a promotional opportunity for them, they're going to get more people through the door, maybe different people through the door to experience that. The other idea is the pop-up. An establishment could say, invite someone in to be a caterer in their, so if I have a real estate agency, for example, I could work with a caterer to do a pop-up culinary arts feature and a poetry reading and a solo guitarist. I could keep going all day. I won't, I promise. The other model, and we've done this with the Third Street Gallery, is we partner with businesses to do, in June, we did individually wrapped refreshments, which we will probably do again for October. I mean, it allows us to highlight businesses around the community by bringing them into spaces that we would be providing refreshments for an artist reception anyway. So there's a lot of flexibility. Does that answer your question?
So do we provide, the city provide the refreshments?
For Third Street Gallery, yes. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not for Art Walk?
Not for the other host locations.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and so today you may have seen the poster artist announcement that just went out today. I have posters for you. We printed them on somewhat beefier paper because they are a season poster. So I'll hand these around. This one for you. This is an artwork by Bridget Schneider. You may be familiar with her as a market vendor, but also she does extensive work in really beautiful traditional materials. This particular piece appealed to the selection panel because it's an abstracted calendar. So if you look at the third Thursday, if you read those boxes as weekdays, she's told us a little tale about third Thursdays. And so there's a lot of space for us to explore with design as we look into the rest of the season. Next, one thing that I noted during budget season were some questions about projected increases to Art Walk revenue. And so I wanted to show everybody a model of what that looks like. Part of that comes from a more expansive and specific update to sponsorship opportunities. So those have been delivered to local businesses. We do already have one full season sponsor, which is a really exciting thing. The other piece I wanted to highlight is our registration fees. They are different between October through May and June. In June, the registration fees are higher because that street fair costs more to put on. So we're excited to see this program come into balance in the next couple of years. Okay. All right, one other piece. This is our very first individual and family donation program. It's called Team Art Walk. We have those cards as well. Read the book, see the movie. Here you go. So on one side, we've got the invitation, and then the form on the flip side allows individuals and families to join Team Art Walk. They get a name in the flyer, and that's all season long. And they get this great baseball tee that looks just like a team jersey. So this is new territory, and we're excited to see what happens. But we wanted to do something that was inclusive of not just the businesses who've been really great supporters, but also the families and audiences that really enjoy Art Walk, and to let them have a way to show their support. So a lot of different new ideas with Art Walk this year.
No shortage of creativity there, Megan.
Thank you. Okay, and then finally, entertainment in the park. We have, this one's quite a bit farther out, and so we don't have as much specific information here, but this is one of our major events during the year. We are looking at, we'll confirm these dates, but we're looking at June 30 and July 7th. Our our traditional event partners here are Moscow Public Library, and Avista Utilities has been a major supporter of this event. The tentative lineup, the always desired Reptile Man and Radical Rick. These are crowd pleasers. These are really community favorites. So we will be approaching those artists this year. So that's not confirmed, but we're hopeful to get those performers. Here again, we've never really had a worked out intentional sponsorship structure for this program. So we're starting small with 3 different sponsorship levels. They do all refer to turtles. That is in reference to the Reptile Man being the #1 fan favorite. And we will in this next year be rolling out Shelley, the turtle that you see there on the bottom right. So with that, I'd love to take questions. It's officially the longest report in City of Moscow history.
Yeah.
Should we know who the Reptile Man is?
Yeah, the Reptile Man has reptiles, and they show up. They do demonstrations. The kids get to come and touch the reptiles, to hang out with the reptiles. There's it's this really great performance and science overlap, and brings that in the house every year. They love him. It's a good one. So.
He's very popular.
Oh yes, yeah. This is yeah.
I did have one more. Are you planning on sort of just passively fundraising in this way? As if somebody, comes upon a booth, say, and there's T-shirts for sale, that kind of a thing? Or are we planning on more actively putting this opportunity out?
Yeah, we are going to be actively putting this opportunity out. So imagining that this will probably be on the backside of the flyer for this first October Art Walk. And then the Arts Commission has been given the task of seeing how this fits their outreach capacity. This is something that they've been eager to do for quite some time, and so we'll see how that fits for them. But we will also be doing promotions about that. And I think once people see others walking around in the really great shirts, they're going to want them.
So will the city continue to partner with or collaborate with Roger in terms of, like, we just did one up at Pritchard? And so the question is, are we going to continue doing that, or not?
In what way? Like in all
No,
programs?
just in the most recent one, the plein air?
Oh, the plein air. Yeah, we haven't talked about next year yet. It's really wonderful to have that show in that big, beautiful space this year. Not really sure. They are a brand new nonprofit, so we're not sure what direction they're going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't have that information at this point. But we're gonna see what happens. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to pass along that I heard really good feedback about how that event was organized overall, but also in particular the reception, which I know was probably kind of tricky given the space and the number of people and the food and everything else.
Yeah, it was threading the needle for sure. It was one of those wanting to do it exactly right. But thank you for that.
You guys have really stretched it out. There is a lot going on. So kudos to everyone involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And everything always looks so good.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Come to expect that from our art department here. Are there any staff reports?
None this afternoon.
Meeting adjourned. Let's go.